Welcome to this Conservative Home event in partnership with FSB, the Federation of Small Businesses. I'm Charlotte Gill, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and today I'm delighted to introduce Alok Sharma, Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and Martin McTague, Policy and Advocacy Chair of FSB, who will be in conversation about the Conservatives' plans and policy proposals for the UK's small businesses and the self-employed as we navigate through the pandemic and beyond. We're discussing how we can ensure job protection and creation, how to help our high streets and city centres, what approach can be given to clamp down on late payments, and how to help small businesses prosper post-COVID. So welcome, Alok and Martin. To begin with, I'm going to ask both of you to speak for around 5 minutes, giving your general thoughts on today's topic of conversation, and then we'll start a dialogue about it. So if we start with you, Alok, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you for inviting me on. Look, I think the first thing to say is I want to say a huge thank you to all the businesses, the business owners who have tuned into this program, this event. And, I speak every day to businesses. Martin and I, we were just discussing, have become Zoom buddies over the past few months. To understand precisely what the issues are and how government can then act. And I also know that there are very many businesses that have made real sacrifices, entrepreneurs who've made real sacrifices to keep their business going, to protect the livelihoods of their employees. And I really genuinely want to thank absolutely everyone for everything that they've done. And quite often, there will be a discussion about whether government should be doing more. Can I just assure you that my ministry's team and I are absolutely championing the case for business at the heart of government, which is so important, particularly at this point in time. And now, in terms of the support that we have provided, obviously there's around 190 billion pounds worth of support. I'm not going to go through the full detail of all of that. You'll have heard that many times before. But of course, it is the case that since 2010, we have seen a significant increase in the number of small businesses that we've had created in this country. And I think that's something I really welcome. It shows the entrepreneurial spirit that we have in the United Kingdom. And absolutely, SMEs are the backbone of our business community. So what is it that we do as a next step? And we'll have an opportunity to discuss that. But I think as well as protecting jobs, supporting businesses now with the measures that we've put in place, I think the next step is looking at what we can do in terms of supporting jobs of the future, supporting the industries of the future, and particularly looking at how we can support exporters, SMEs that are focused on research and development. So I look forward to the discussion this evening.
And Martin?
Thanks, Charlotte. Well, I don't think it takes a great deal of insight to say we've got a really tough winter coming. I think as the Prime Minister dubbed it, a bumpy winter ahead. And I think the key to all this is going to be the role of the entrepreneurs. In fact, that was acknowledged by the Chancellor in his speech earlier today. And it's worth remembering that if we go back to the last recession, 80% of the new jobs created as a result of that recession were created by SMEs and the self-employed. So we know we've got a central role to play to get out of this mess that we're in, that is obviously nobody's fault. But it's not all gloom and doom. I mean, there are real opportunities. I think Alok was just saying that there are some, like, for example, the new export markets that are opening up with the new trade agreements. And we're really pleased to see that these trade agreements, a central part of that is a small business chapter, which is an important part of making sure that small businesses can take advantage of those opportunities. There's the new green growth that's going to be available. I think everybody can see that there's a determined effort to reach net zero in time for 2050. And we've got the COP26 coming up where we're going to reinforce that commitment. And then there's the tech expansion. I think by some measures, we've made about 3 years worth of progress in only 3 months in accelerating a lot of these technology developments. But one area that we cannot hide from, and I think Charlotte and I were speaking before we came on, is the collapse in retail, hospitality and leisure, you know, where there is just no demand for their services. And the problem is that they're going to be forced into either a zombie state where they're completely dependent on debt, or they're going to have to go into hibernation. And I think here the government's response is really important. Now, so far, they've been very sensitive. They've seen that cash is the most important thing, and you know the measures that Rishi Sunak put in place recently are going to make a big difference. But if they're going to survive, they need to convert that tax into. They're going to have to try and get that debt down. And one way that we have championed, and I know Alok knows this from conversations we've had before, is trying to convert some of that tax into a contingent liability, which means that they can then invest in the future, the kind of things that we've just been talking about as investment opportunities. So looking back, what are the lessons we've learned about this crisis? Well, I think there's 3 things I would focus on. The first is, I feel we've let down the single sort of company director, the entrepreneur who's trying to forge a business on his own. And the problem is that we've set out mixed messages about, well, you know, this is an efficient way of dealing with your tax affairs, but then when the problems start to happen, you're on your own. And the other thing, which is an age-old problem, and it's getting much worse, is late payment. This is now accelerating the problem of late payment. We're getting 62% of small businesses surveyed coming back and saying that their payment conditions are getting worse. I think the other thing it's done is it's exposed some of the weaknesses in our banking structure. So when we first introduced, or the government introduced, CBILS, it was clear that the banks couldn't cope with the kind of volumes that were being asked for them to deal with. And then we're now into bounce back loans, where some of the fraud that has managed to slip through the net will also expose some of those weaknesses. But in the future, strangely, we will probably need to depend, from a self-employed point of view, on a digitization of the tax system. So that's another lesson we've learned, that maybe if you look at the introduction of the self-employed income support scheme, it was struggled to try and help the self-employed because it didn't have access to up-to-date tax records. So I think that's a lesson we've also learned. But I just want to finish on one thing that I picked up from some of John Glenn's comments in an earlier session. He said, we should not add disabling burdens to the self-employed and small businesses. And I think there's a lot of talk about raising taxes, but we need to see that those businesses are not burdened by additional taxes when they're trying to recover from this crisis.
Well, thank you, Martin. And Alok, did you want to come back on some of those points?
Yeah, so I mean, Martin's right. I think he made the point that through this pandemic crisis, we have managed collectively, actually working together, to telescope what would have taken months and years into a matter of weeks. You know, if we look at the loan scheme that were put together, the CBILS scheme, the bounce back loan scheme, all of that was delivered through the British Business Bank, which sits in Bay. So we were very much central to that. And Martin's right. At the start of that process, you know, I personally had very many conversations with banks about the pace at which things are being done. But you know, to be to sort of put it also from a slightly different perspective, is that we were doing things at such pace that actually people were also learning to run at a time that, you know, in normal circumstances you'd be learning to walk. So we are now in a position that we've got well over 1 million businesses who have been supported with loans, and you will have seen the recent statement from the Chancellor in terms of extending the period of which those can be paid back. And so, this has been a case of listening and learning and actually responding to what we hear back from the FSB and others, and we will continue to do that. On the issue of late payments, maybe we may come on to that later, but just say that, Martin, I agree with you. I think this is a big issue. This is something, Charlotte, that I was working on with Martin and folks like Robin Bourne out of the Thames Valley before I became a minister, and we were really, really focused on this. And let's talk about this a bit more, but I think you're absolutely right. That is a big area that we want to try and support SMEs, and I think particularly in this sort of COVID environment where perhaps larger businesses may be looking to conserve cash. They wouldn't normally be in that position. So we need all businesses to show sensitivity to one another. But I certainly think there is much more we can do in terms of bearing down on late payments. But let's have that discussion, because I know that's one of the areas, Charlotte, that you want to talk about as well.
Okay, and with the obviously, something in the press that's been quite contentious at the moment is the 10 p.m. curfew, because it's all very well the Treasury giving a lot of help with the job support scheme. Do you think there'll be any movement on that? Because a lot of small businesses will say that that's really that's putting them, as Martin says, into hibernation now. A lot of these companies going that way. What do you think about how long this is going to stay?
Yeah, look, Charlotte, I get the frustration. I really do understand it, and as I said, I'm having those conversations on a daily basis with the FSB, but other business representatives, and indeed individual hospitality businesses as well. I mean, what I would say is two things. Firstly, there's been a lot of discussion about whether we provided any kind of sort of sector support. So I think it is fair to say that in terms of hospitality and leisure and retail, there was specific support provided in terms of grants, in terms of a rates holiday for a year. And if you look at the P&L of any business, particularly a small business, rates is really a pretty big fixed cost element, and that obviously has been taken away for a year. So that's made a difference. The other thing that we've done, of course, is worked with Martin and hundreds of actually other businesses and business representative organizations, and indeed the trade unions as well, in putting together that very early guidance in how different workplaces, different environments which we're going to have customers coming in could make themselves COVID secure. I actually think that's been a success. I think everyone has coalesced around that guidance, and from everything that I have seen, the vast majority of businesses have taken that really seriously and put those measures in place. And that actually is what's also given people the confidence to go into consumer-facing businesses, to go into hospitality. Now, in terms of the 10 p.m. curfew, I know that's frustrating, but I also know that when you talk to businesses, they do understand that there are reasons that this has been put in place, and they are able to operate for a large part of the evening. I mean, normally you would have businesses perhaps close at 11 o'clock, and I think there's that's one of the issues that people have raised. But there is a reason that we have put in place this 10 p.m. curfew. But as I said, I understand the frustrations, and as I said at the start of this whole process, is that you can be certain that I and my ministerial team are representing the voice of business in government.
And Martin, what are you hearing from the businesses you talk to about the curfew?
There's a couple of things I think I'd emphasise. One is that the curfew is seen as being a bit arbitrary. The 10 p.m. limit, seen by many publicans that I speak to as being something that they can't justify in terms of the science or haven't heard the science that justifies it. So that adds an area of frustration, I think, that if they're going to have a part of their business shackled by that kind of arrangement, they really do want to understand what the science is behind it. The second thing, though, that I think Alok mentioned is there are a lot of businesses, and Alok's department has done a great job in providing good guidance that has allowed them to become COVID secure. So they've put in really strict arrangements to make sure that their employees are as safe as they possibly can be. But the frustration now is that because of some of the limitations of test and trace, is that they could get an employee walk in to their very safe environment and could find out very quickly that or within days that they've been carrying the COVID virus, and they've suddenly infected the whole of their group of employees. So that makes those businesses very, very vulnerable, because no matter what steps they take within their own organization, they're always exposed to that risk. And it's a risk they can't really quantify or can't control.
And Alok, how is the government reassuring businesses that the test and trace system is, because there's been a few flaws in it pointed out today, with thousands of cases missing. How are you reassuring businesses that it's going to be better for them, better for their business?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the whole issue that we've had in terms of testing capacity from the start of this pandemic. And the reality is, being perfectly frank, is that we didn't really have effectively a sort of testing industry in the UK at the start of this process. So we, in March, we were doing the capacity of 2,000 tests a day. As you've seen, that's grown into the hundreds of thousands, but obviously there is demand as well. So I'm not here to sort of offer excuses. We know we need to get this absolutely right. There is more work being done in terms of increasing capacity. You've seen the statements that Matt Hancock has made today in Parliament in relation to test and trace, and we have to keep working hard to make sure we get all of this right. But I mean, the one thing I can tell you is that the people who are working on this are completely committed to making sure that we get this right and we get that capacity up, and we ensure that those who are symptomatic are able to have a test. I know at one point there was an issue about how far you had to travel to get a test. The vast majority of people actually will be able to get a test relatively close to home, within sort of 10, 20, 30 miles of home, but we need to keep working on it. So I mean, other than telling you that we are doing everything we can to get the system right, I don't think there's probably much more that I can add at this stage, Charlotte.
Can I give you one example, Charlotte? It's a silly example, but I was talking to a guy that runs a convenience store, and he said that if he goes to his local restaurant and any time in the last 24 hours, somebody has been in that restaurant that is COVID positive, and he then gets alerted by test and trace that he is one of the potentially contaminated people, that he would then have to shut his whole business down for a fortnight, because, classic small business, it all depends on him and his management of the operation. And so that's an enormous price for him to pay. And yet he may have had absolutely no contact with the person who happened to walk in sometime in the last 24 hours into that particular restaurant. So it's, there are still lots of things that have got a potential impact on small businesses that I know Secretary of State's working really hard to fix. And we've got a meeting with Dido Harding, and she's doing a webinar with a lot of our members to try and, to reassure them about what's going on. But that has now become the central issue for, I think, a lot of small businesses.
And we've got some questions coming through now. So one question that's also been in the news today I've seen is, so Paul Jerry says, I, among others, have still not been granted the bounce back loan from my bank. What is the government doing to ensure that banks provide the loans in a timely way? And this chimes in, there's an FT report today talking about this becoming quite commonplace. It's also saying that some of the banks are taking up to 6 to 8 weeks to give the loans by the point that the scheme expires. Alok, what's your answer to Paul's inquiry?
Well, obviously, without knowing the specific details of Paul's particular application, I can't really comment. I mean, what I would say is that if through ConHome, Paul, you want to get in touch with me and make me aware of it on the particular circumstances, then we can have a look. But I think there is a wider issue here that you are raising, and actually we have seen, as I said, the bounce back loans has been particularly successful, with many hundreds of thousands of people getting a loan, and it should be a relatively easy process. We will, of course, follow up to make sure that the providers are making sure that these loans are going out of the door. But there may well be individual circumstances why particular loans haven't been made. I mean, it should be a simple process with the filling out of a relatively straightforward form. But as I said, in the case of Paul, if he wants to send his details through, I'm very happy to have a look.
Well, that's great. And Martin, did you want to add any comment on?
Yeah. I mean, we were really strong supporters of the introduction of bounce back loans, because I think, and I have to give credit, Alok was a very strong advocate of this process and represented our concerns about the CBILS loan scheme, which was really struggling to cope with demand. So we are strong supporters of bounce back loans, but it's clear now that because they've been targeted by fraudsters, that some banks are now getting very nervous about the potential for losses. I think that the FT article today shows that some of the banks feel that they've been particularly targeted by these fraudsters. And I know in the case of HSBC, we were full of praise for the fact that they were one of the few banks that actually accepted non-HSB customers and processed their applications. But it seems like that has now left them more exposed than the others to the potential for fraud. So it is a really tricky issue. But what I don't want to take away from is that these loans have been an absolute lifeline for many, many businesses. And without it, we would be facing an enormous problem of corporate failure.
Given that, given all the difficulties with businesses at the moment, small businesses, how are we going to, obviously sorting out part of the unemployment problem is getting more jobs created. How are we going to encourage anyone in the current circumstances to get going?
So is that directed at me, Charlotte?
Yeah. Would you like to?
Well, look, I think before I came into politics, I spent 20 years of my life working in business, advising small businesses, large businesses, and actually, what you find is that people are pretty entrepreneurial. They want to get on and they want to make their business successful. So I think there is, Martin would be interesting to hear his thoughts, but I'm pretty sure he will tell you that his members are raring to go. They obviously need support, and as I said, there's a financial support we've provided. But actually, when we talk about the hospitality sector, which we've had a discussion on, you'll also know that we put in place some regulatory measures and regulatory changes through the Business and Planning Act, which I and my department took through Parliament. And we made it easier for businesses to be able to have outdoor seating, and I think actually that has made a difference for businesses. In fact, what I'm hearing now from some hospitality businesses, they're looking to see whether they can extend this outdoor seating even throughout the winter months, putting up awning, perhaps some heaters outside. So people are being really, really innovative in terms of pushing their business forward, and they are also changing their model. You're seeing businesses which perhaps previously weren't online, now going online, becoming much more digital. And if there is some positivity coming out of this COVID pandemic, it is the fact that businesses are looking to innovate to ensure that they can continue to be successful. But in terms of what we from a government point of view can do, Martin talked about the fact that we need to look at green jobs, and he talked about COP26, which I'm happy to come back to. But in terms of green jobs, we've just announced, in fact, that we launched on the 30th the Green Homes Grant, which is £2 billion of money going to support up to 600,000 households with energy efficient grants to make their homes more energy efficient. And this does three things. One is it will help householders cut their fuel costs. You're talking, depending on the measures you put in place, it could be up to £600 a year. It supports tens of thousands of jobs, these sort of what I think we would call green van jobs. And what it also does is help in terms of getting to our net zero target by 2050 in terms of cutting emissions. So I think that's just a very clear example of where the government is also setting out measures which are near-term measures in terms of supporting jobs and supporting individuals, but also help with our longer-term aims and goals of reaching net zero by 2050.
And Martin, have you, in terms of the businesses you're talking to, are you seeing a push with all the investment in green jobs and industry? Are you seeing more people wanting to innovate in that area?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about the role I perform is that you see these fantastically innovative businesses starting up all the time. And I think there will be businesses that will adapt really quickly to this changing environment. So they're seeing opportunities, for example, online trading opportunities. They're seeing green, ways of taking advantage of the green tech explosion that Alok was talking about. And I am absolutely convinced that people who maybe have lost their jobs in slower moving, bigger organizations will respond to this and will adapt and innovate and get involved in trying to start new businesses. But the important thing is that what we mustn't do is stifle that innovation by weighing them down in debt so that they cannot invest in their own businesses or other people's businesses. So that's a clear message for me. I don't have any concerns about their entrepreneurial spirit. It's just their ability to find investment.
And what other spaces are we seeing? Obviously, medicine must be with trying to discover the vaccine and other COVID measures. That must be an industry that the government is very hungry to get more people into. Can you talk a bit about that, Alok?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, vaccines are not normally associated with the Department for Business, but of course we do R&D, which is a big part of our budget, and so we have the Vaccines Task Force, which sits in Bays, and they've been working incredibly diligently and at a real sort of fast pace. So we have managed over a matter of months to secure 340 million doses, covering 6 of what we believe are the most promising vaccine candidates around at the moment. And if you look at, as a country, we've always had life sciences as a sector where we have led, and you cast your mind back to Edward Jenner, who invented the vaccine for smallpox in the 18th century. You fast forward to now, and at the Jenner Institute at Oxford University, that has been the place where one of the leading vaccine candidates in the world has been researched, and that's the one that has a tie-up with AstraZeneca. We have funded the research, some of the research. We've also funded some of the costs of the clinical trials, and similarly the vaccine at Imperial College as well, where we've backed that with the funding. So there are those particular sectors where money has gone in, and actually, as well as that, what I would call near-term support that we've been providing to businesses. On top of that, there is also support that's been provided to high-growth tech sector companies. So we've had the Future Fund, where money has gone in, and then also in terms of innovative small businesses which are doing research and development. There's a £750 million pot which has been made available as well. So there is a lot that we have continued to do to support innovation, to support the businesses which are looking at developing the technologies of the future, and we will continue to do that. In terms of research and development, I'm very, very clear that I want the UK to be a science superpower. And for me, this is really personal. I started life as a scientist. Actually, soon after I got elected as a member of parliament, one of my former professors got in touch and pointed out that my career had gone in totally the wrong direction. I'd gone from being a scientist to an accountant to an investment banker to be a politician. How much further can you fall, I think is what he said in his email to me. But this is my chance for redemption when it comes to supporting R&D and innovation, and the Chancellor's, of course, pledged that we'll be spending 22 billion by 24-25 on R&D. And we've seen from around the world that actually countries which spend more on research and development, public R&D, they will also attract more private sector R&D, and ultimately they're also the countries that are the most productive. And I think that's what Martin and I and all our colleagues in business want. We want high value added jobs, we want higher productivity in our country, and ultimately also creating those national champions that can help to export.
And how are we going to get this message out to the next generation? Obviously we want in schools and universities, we want to inspire young entrepreneurs. What do you think, Martin?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is at schools that you have to start to change the mindset of people that maybe think that they've got to follow a fairly conventional path. Alok has just mentioned he didn't follow a conventional path, but I think a lot of them could end up starting businesses where they thought they were going to be working for bigger businesses. And there's an example really is this new Kickstart scheme that's starting, where young people who may be coming out of university youth, who have found it really difficult in the current climate to find roles, can start with really small businesses in quite senior positions. And that will quickly give them the grounding in how small businesses work and give them the inspiration to get up and start growing their own businesses and creating the jobs that we all want to see in the future.
Cool, and I'm going to take us back to the Q&A. So Mark Weston says, I own a shop in central London, rateable value over 51k, so no grant, footfall 30% year on year. 85 Conservative MPs tried to increase the grant above 51k, but were refused. Why? And maybe this is another where Alok will find himself messaging after.
I'll take it that's directed at me, Charlotte.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, I mean, there are, wherever you have a threshold, there's always a discussion about what the right threshold is. I think what we have done is obviously, pitch this at different, how can I put it like this? We have pitched this so that we are able to support the most businesses that have been most in need, the smallest businesses at the end of the day. And there have been two schemes running. One is, of course, the £25,000 grant scheme. There's also the £10,000 grant scheme that's been running as well. And we have supported very many hundreds of thousands of businesses through that process. And the other thing that we did do, I mean, I announced this some months ago, and local authorities have taken advantage of this, is a discretionary scheme as well, because we listened when people said that not every business was able to get the support which they felt needed the support. This was something that members of Parliament, made very clear, and so we did. We put in place a discretionary scheme as well. So I'm very sorry that if we have not been able to help absolutely every single business with that particular grant scheme, but of course there have been other measures that have been available to also support people in the the retail sector. So I talked about the 1 year holiday from business rates, which I think is a big element of fixed costs. But then also people have taken advantage of the furlough scheme as well.
And Martin, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, frankly, the government was quite brave to pitch it at 51,000. There was a lot of siren voices suggesting it should be lower than that, and I think it was pitched at a level I think we felt was a reasonable compromise. It could always go further. We'd love it to go further. There are a lot of businesses that needed additional support. Most of them, I would say, based in the southeast, and they have got, especially in the London area, unique problems of, there are very few businesses that have got rateable values less than 51,000. But, I think the area that Alok touched on earlier was about the discretionary grants. And there's £1.3 billion in grants that haven't been spent by local authorities, that has in effect been returned to the Treasury. And we'd like to see those put back to work and try and address the kind of problems that your questioner raised earlier.
Oh, and we've got another, I think this is a really good question, from Mark, and he asks, many innovations come from startups growing out of low-cost co-working spaces. Many co-working spaces are struggling with depressed occupancy due to COVID fears. Does the government recognise the value of these spaces for innovation? And what can the government do to ensure the co-working spaces remain viable during this pandemic? And I guess that's quite interesting anyway, because I mean, one thing I often hear complained about from perhaps millennials, sort of own age group, is that these places are also quite expensive. It's quite expensive to innovate in London, to set up a hub. So I just wanted your thoughts, Alok, on that question, and generally co-working spaces and how we're going to make them more viable.
Yeah, so and I'm sure Martin or someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in terms of issues such as the co-working spaces, I think that's one of the types of businesses that the discretionary grant was also aimed at supporting. So there was support that was made available. But look, we're having a conversation here, and I'm in the market. If people have ideas and thoughts, they should feed those through Charlotte, either through you or indeed sort of email me directly. We have at pretty fast pace tried to do our part as a government in supporting businesses, and I think that's been appreciated. And I think Martin talked about a lifeline that's been provided for very many businesses. And by the way, I'm really proud of what we have done collectively as a government, working with the business community, listening to each other and providing that support. And the cost of not stepping up and providing support, I believe, would have been far greater than the cost of support we provided. But of course, if people have ideas and thoughts, I'm very happy to hear this.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, the thing about co-working spaces, or that in many cases the business rate relief was given to the landlord, and many landlords didn't pass it on to their tenants within these spaces. But and I know Alok has mentioned that some of the discretionary grant help was to try and target those people that were left in the lurch by their landlords. In other kinds of co-working spaces, there seems to be a bit of a a renaissance in those spaces. That, you know, that there were some that their business model was being questioned prior to COVID. Now, because of the downsizing of many offices and people wanting to share spaces, they seem to have been revived as a business model. So, you know, I think there is a future for that kind of system, and maybe the taxation system needs to catch up with them, you know, because there's going to be a lot of changes to the way business is done in the next few years. And you know, sometimes the taxation system, the regulatory system are a bit slow to catch up.
And Alok, did you want to come back to that?
No, I mean not specifically on anything. I mean, just to say, Charlotte, that I mean, you know, Martin's raised some very interesting points about tax policy. I won't comment on here on those issues, and ultimately they are, of course, for the Treasury. But as I said, I'm very much in the market for ideas in terms of what we can do to support. And as I said earlier, so one is you know, the financial support that is provided. The other is, are there any, you know, regulatory easements? Is there anything that we can do, as we have done in a responsible way through the Business and Planning Act, to support you know, businesses in different sectors, quite frankly.
Okay, and we've got a question for Martin now from Alex Waddington. How easy are your members finding it to adapt to the new post-COVID digital world, and what extra support do they need to increase skills?
Well, it depends on which sector they're in. I think there are some people who are already well ahead of the curve and are taking advantage of this post-COVID, or at least you know, the emergence from a COVID world, and they're anticipating changes. And it's quite remarkable, when we did a recent survey of small businesses, we found that there was a sort of, I think it was roughly 10% that were very, very gloomy about the prospects for the future. And they were balanced out by almost 10% that thought that there was a really rosy prospect. The rest, obviously, have left it on, at the moment, can't see a clear picture. But you know, there are real opportunities in this post-COVID world, and I think I'm confident that small businesses will be able to adapt. The bit that worries me are those businesses that I mentioned in the opening remarks that had viable businesses prior to this pandemic starting, have now been loaded down with debt, and they don't have any realistic prospect of trying to trade out of that. And I think in that situation, we need to come up with innovative new ways of dealing with their overburdened balance sheets.
And Alok, what have you seen of people moving to digital? What's been your experience from government?
Well, so you mean specifically, Charlotte, in terms of government working, so to speak?
Yeah, well, just any thoughts you had on
yeah
small businesses have transitioned.
Yeah, so I think we've seen in government, as we've seen actually in many office-based organisations, where people have been able to work from home. They have, in fact, sort of transferred, you know, to working from home. And as you know, the current message is that if you are able to work effectively from home, then you should do that. You know, have a discussion with your employer. You know, have a pragmatic discussion about how that will work. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not this particular way of working is going to be here for us to stay, even in post-COVID. I mean, depending on who you talk to, there will be some businesses which are office-based will say that they want to be, you know, more flexible. They've seen from this particular pandemic period that actually you can work from home, and you know, in some cases, people's productivity has actually gone up. I think there is an issue, though, in terms of whether this is a sort of, you know, a long-term full-time solution for people overall. It may well be for some people, but you know, as human beings, human interaction, I think, is quite important. And much as I personally love doing stuff on Zoom, I would love us to get back eventually to a world where we are interacting face-to-face and having those discussions. I think it's an important point. It'd be interesting to hear Martin's view on this. But if you are working with a team of people that you work with for a very long period of time, I think over a long period of time you can sustain doing stuff through the medium of Zoom. I think it's much more challenging for new people joining a business who are not able to build up those networks, are not able to get that face-to-face discussion, that experience, that mentoring, which is so vital in any organization, whether it's a business or government. And actually, if you are looking for new clients, I mean, again, I'd be interested to hear Martin's reflections on this, but actually, that I suspect is still going to be done in a physical client-facing way in terms of pitching for business rather than through the medium of Zoom. So we have learned the positive side of this. We have learned that actually we can do things electronically more efficiently than perhaps we thought before. That has had an impact on our high streets, particularly in big towns and cities, because the people who'd normally be coming in and spending money in those shops, perhaps not as many are coming in. But I do think that post-COVID, a lot of people reflect on what is the best way of working for their business, and what is the most efficient way of working for their business, and we may see different models emerging.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I read stuff that suggests that the world is going to be divided into those people that will wholly carry on being remote workers and those that will want to rush back to a face-to-face environment as quickly as possible. I think the reality is we're going to end up with something that's a hybrid between the two. Alok's right that, a lot of sales meetings are difficult to finalize unless you've got that sense of a face-to-face reaction from people. But what I'm hearing is a lot of the sort of more speculative sales meetings that, nobody's going to fly halfway around the world for a meeting that could be speculative, are now taking place via digital platforms. And they are managing to merge the two worlds successfully. They're getting the best out of both things. And I think you're right to point out that, people who are new to an organization need the opportunity to build their networks. I think what we're going to end up with is a situation where, lots of businesses will spend maybe a third of their time face-to-face and the rest of their time remotely. But that's something that's going to start to take shape in the next few months, I think.
Sounds very interesting, looking into the future and how it's all going to pan out. I wanted to ask a bit about national insurance, because the government has refused, it's refusing to rule out increasing national insurance contributions for the self-employed in the next budget. Do you think that any such tax increases would be counterproductive to the economic recovery, and wouldn't it be an unconservative move? What do you think, Alok?
Charlotte, don't tempt me, Charlotte, now to talk about tax policy. As you know, that is not my area of responsibility. Look, I mean, I think we just have to wait and see whatever it is that the Chancellor comes up with. I mean, he's played an absolute blinder up until this point in terms of supporting businesses, supporting jobs, supporting livelihoods. I'm not, on a serious note, I don't think you'd expect me to sort of comment on future tax policy in the government. What I would say is, as Conservatives, we have always been the party that believes in keeping taxes as low as we possibly can, and I think that is definitely going to be something that we continue to do.
Yes.
I don't mind being tempted, Charlotte. For me, that we're coming into a period where I think we'll have a very, very fragile recovery, and although I recognise that at some point, in the midterm, we're going to have changes to the tax structure. And I don't think that necessarily we should get fixated on particular types of taxation. I know NIC has been suggested as an easy way of raising additional money, especially on the self-employed. But I think that would be so counterproductive in the short term. Because what you're trying to do, the point I made earlier about 80% of jobs being created by small businesses and self-employed. You don't want to stifle that at such an early stage. And if you are going to raise taxes in the future, this is an opportunity to reform the taxation system, to look at it afresh, to think about different ways in which you can raise taxes, not go for the tired old routine of let's bash the self-employed with an increase in national insurance.
So we so now, so Alok, we were discussing a bit of late payments at the beginning, and I've got a question that ties into this. So Daniel Coleman has had issues with customers not paying invoices. It would be good to legislate that interest should be automatically added if the payment was not received in 60 days. Alok, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so I agree that late payments is, I mean, frankly, it's always been a big issue, and I think it has, particularly in the COVID pandemic crisis, it has become it has an added resonance, if I can put it like that. You know, in 2017, we set up the Office of the Small Business Commissioner to look at where there were particular problems that small businesses were having, to try and resolve those issues. And some progress has been made through the Small Business Commissioner. But what we have now done is launched a consultation, because I think the time has come to expand the powers of the Small Business Commissioner, ultimately about to protect small businesses with action on late payments. And so part of that consultation is looking at the power to order companies to pay their partners. This is in terms of powers that the Small Business Commissioner may well have. The power to compel companies to share information during an investigation by the Small Business Commissioner, the power to launch investigations into suspected bad payment practice without the need to first have received a complaint from a small business. If the Small Business Commissioner is hearing from other places that there's a particular issue with a company, whether he's able to investigate. And then, of course, expanding the scope for complaints of the Small Business Commissioner. We talk a lot about payment matters, but actually, what about other areas when it comes to supply of goods and services, and then also to review and report on the wider business practices outside of payment matters as well. And again, that would come down to an instruction from my department, formerly the Secretary of State. So I hope what people will do, and Martin, I know he and his team are working closely with Bays on this, with Paul Scully, the Minister for Small Business. We want businesses to take part in this consultation. Give us your thoughts on the proposals, but I hope what you've heard from me loud and clear is that this is an area that we need to act further, and I will do so.
Yeah, I mean, this is the issue that I think is the absolute #1 issue, year in, year out, whenever I have any kind of meetings with small businesses. I would say about 80% of the businesses I speak to will at some point have dealt with poor payment practice. And it's become a culture in UK business where it's seen as acceptable to treat their supply chain in this appalling way. And it needs a complete change in attitudes. One of the best ways of doing this, and something we've recommended to the government, is to make sure that there's one person responsible for the behaviour of their supply chain treatment in any big company. And that person would be the chair of the audit committee, so that you could go to that person and make sure that they had no place to hide. They knew the data that related to poor payment practice, and you could find reliable information from them, and they would be responsible for false information. And because, I mean, we saw examples with Carillion where, the senior directors of that company had no idea how bad their payment practice had become, or at least pretended not to have any idea. And then the other thing is, and I think Alok touched on it earlier, that the Small Business Commission is doing an excellent job, but has got one arm tied behind the back, because they're often rely on some sort of whistleblower to inform them of poor practice from a particular company. Well, that just means that that company has just destroyed their relationship with probably a major customer. And you know, that is an unacceptable position to put anybody in if you're trying to stop poor behavior. And I think if the Small Business Commissioner had the powers to investigate this kind of behavior and find evidence with particular companies, and had a real power to hurt them in terms of, you know, the fines they could levy, then I think that would change behavior. It would start to make people behave in a more responsible way. And it's massively overdue. And I know Alok strongly believes in changing this position. So, you know, it can't happen too quickly for me.
I know there's quite a lot of online software you can now get to sort of nag people that you need payments, but it's not really doing the trick.
No, I mean, the reality is that there's a lot of people, wouldn't matter how much you nag them, they've decided that they've got the power to pay when they want to pay, and they choose not to pay. And then there's another group whose systems are so awful that they don't even, you know, they have no way of knowing when they're not paying people. But frankly, they never invest in it because they feel under no pressure to invest in improving their performance. So it's either negligence or it's downright poor practice. But it's endemic. It's everywhere, and it needs to stop.
And do you think some people are using the pandemic as an excuse for doing it even more? And
Absolutely. I mean, I think Alok mentioned it earlier that, you know, this obviously lots of businesses are going to be under pressure. And I was tempted just to name names of one particular pub chain that has decided that they would stop paying all their supply chain as soon as this pandemic hit. You know, they just issued an edict that they weren't going to pay anybody. So, you know, this has happened all over the country, and we're getting reports, significant reports of serious problems with payment, and it's just beyond the pale.
Okay, and Alok, unless there was anything you wanted to respond to there, I'll move on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, Martin, perhaps you can separately let me know about your blacklist. Be interesting to hear which particular businesses are not behaving appropriately. But look, you know, Martin's highlighted with great passion that this is one of the biggest issues that faces small businesses. You know, you can talk about tax regime, you can talk about all of that stuff, you can talk about the regulatory environment, but this is just plain and simple people being paid on time for work they have done or for services or products that they've provided, and we shouldn't have to nag larger businesses to pay people on time. Look, I mean, from time to time, there are errors and people get this wrong. So I'm not here sort of suggesting that you know, somehow you know, every business out there is doing this, and there's lots of very, very responsible businesses which also have signed up to the prompt payment code and are there and making a real example in terms of supporting businesses. But we need everyone to be doing this. And as I said, please respond to this consultation. I know Martin will make sure that his members respond to it. And then once we have all of that information in, we will come forward with some detailed proposals.
Okay, so you're going to have quite a busy inbox, Alok, after this session, I feel.
Well, it's Charlotte is already very busy, but it's always good to have more work to do.
So we've got a question from Johnny Abraham, and I'll come back to you again, Alok. So he asks, will there be additional support for businesses that are unable to trade due to the ongoing restrictions? So businesses operating in events, and I guess the nightlife sector has been lobbying for quite a while about feeling a bit neglected, that it's being slowly sort of killed off. What do you think about this events question and more broadly on nightlife?
Yeah, look, I absolutely get the frustration, and you know, there is the event sector. I know, you know, you said nightclubs, for instance. I know that the wedding industry, for instance, obviously has a lot of concerns as well. And I really do get the frustration. I've spent the last few days talking to the sector, but ultimately what we want to try and do is make sure that we're able to get areas that are currently in restrictions back open. We want to make sure that we actually don't go back to where we were in March. I mean, thankfully we're at a position where large parts of the UK economy are now open. People are able to trade, and that's what I want to continue. So I completely understand the frustration. And in terms of support, in terms of areas where there are restrictions, there are grants that are available of up to £1,500 per business for a sort of 3-week period as well. So that is for areas that are under restriction. But I know that the question here is specifically about those sectors which are not currently able to trade. And I want to do everything we can to see that we can get to a position where they are indeed open. And without going into sort of a great deal of detail here, I am talking to those sectors. We are all across government as well. But ultimately, people, I think, do understand that the measures that we're putting in place, the whole range of measures that have been put in place, is about protecting their health. And actually, if we protect the health of the nation, we do ultimately end up protecting the health of the economy overall as well.
Martin?
I mean, I accept exactly what Alok said, that the priority has to be public health. But if you look at, say, the example of Cineworld, where they've essentially or almost decided to mothball their whole business, and I can see a lot more examples of businesses doing that. And I think if you really believe in the case of cinemas, certainly I'll put a vote in that I would like to see them come back when this is over. There'll be lots of businesses where people would feel that they are part of the quality of life. They're part of what really makes the UK a great place to live, and we would really be much poorer without them. But frankly, they are not going to survive if they're shut down for another 6 months, and they will need to be able to either completely mothball and resurrect themselves in 6 months, or I'm afraid that's the last we're going to see of them.
Okay, and on to another question. So Mark Beckett, and I've seen quite a few protests around the subject matter that he's brought up. So what's your views, Alok, about road closures in London? Should councils like Hackney look to support businesses during this time rather than cause congestion?
Sorry, are you talking specifically about road closures? Or are you talking about the legislation that we brought in to allow for alfresco dining?
Well, you could talk about either.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, in terms of general road closures, and I mean, obviously you will see there may be perfectly good reasons why roads are closed. I mean, I can't comment specifically on that particular issue that Mark has raised, but generally, I think I want to see more flexibility, and I made this point earlier on in our conversation, is that what we put through with the business planning bill has allowed businesses, and many of them taken advantage, to actually use space outside their premises, on the pavement, for instance, to be able to put tables, to put chairs, to be able to conduct their business outside. And we know, I mean, we've learned a lot about this virus over the last few months. The one thing we absolutely know for a fact is that it is much safer for people outside than it is inside. So I think that's the sort of measures that we have taken. I said, if people have other ideas, but in terms of specific road closures in, I don't know, was it in Barking? Hackney. No, I'm sorry, I really can't comment on those particular ones.
Because it seems to me there are some small little things we can do, like you say, the alfresco dining. I mean, having spoken to a bar manager in Soho, he was complaining because he's got a wonderful, and I'm being slightly anecdotal here, but he's got a wonderful terrace outside, and essentially one of the residents, he's just got this one woman who's decided to move next door, and she says she doesn't like this terrace, it causes too much noise, so it's got to shut every day at a certain time. Maybe things like just taking back council powers slightly, maybe the late night levy, you know, where you have the tax on drinks after a certain hour, but maybe those small little tinkerings could just provide another element of support. And I think the al fresco dining kind of falls into that, but I just wanted your thoughts on the councils and how they
Well, yeah, so I think, I mean, look, I think, you know, very many councils are being very pragmatic about this. At the end of the day, it is in their self-interest that businesses prosper, and you know, at the end of the day, that is what we should all be working towards, irrespective of what our political persuasion may be in terms of local councils. So, and actually, some of the other measures that we introduced as well, there was the whole issue around al fresco dining, but there were also planning measures that were introduced in terms of the number of hours that construction could go on. And again, this was to be flexible. So, you know, for the local councils to be much more flexible to get these decisions made faster. I think that's been a success. I mean, I know talking to the construction sector, they have appreciated the changes that have been made, and you know, construction is one of those sectors which effectively drives forward a lot of other economic activity as well. So, yeah, like I say, I'm in the market for people who've got sort of interesting ideas. Very happy to hear those.
What are your thoughts, Martin?
Interesting, you know, it's we're known in small business for always complaining about regulations, but the reality is one man's regulation is another man's protection. So it's, I mean, I can think of a street in a town near me where the al fresco dining has been welcomed by all the pubs and restaurants and cafes, but the footfall has now been restricted because there's the cars that used to travel along that street are no longer traveling along it. So one set of traders are complaining that this is a disaster and this is imposing a terrible restriction on their businesses. Another set of traders are welcoming it as a fantastic move in the right direction. So that it is tricky. You know, government has got an unenviable task of trying to balance that. But I think the general thrust of what the government's been trying to do, which is to allow people to respond more quickly to changing conditions, is a good one.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly enjoyed the al fresco experience, and it's been lovely in Soho. I mean, it's been wonderful to watch. So Amber Astron Christo asks, why don't job centres link with small businesses who offer assessment/startup support for potential entrepreneurs? Alok, what do you think?
Well, so I spent 18 months of my ministerial career as employment minister. And I know there's a lot of innovative work that the job centres do with small businesses. There's a lot of innovative work they do in terms of mentoring programs, working with small and large businesses. So I think there's a lot of that going on. And you know, you've seen the additional support that's being provided to make sure that we have more work coaches in our job centres. And by the way, one of the things that I just want to point out is you know, universal credit. So as I said, I spent 18 months of my career obviously working on universal credit, and you know, the opposition took every opportunity to knock universal credit, right? Absolutely every single opportunity. The interesting thing is that because we have this unified benefit, which is delivered effectively digitally, we've been able to support lots and lots more people. If we were still in a position where, you know, we didn't have universal credit and actually everyone was doing through you know, the welfare system through 6 different benefits, it would just take a lot longer to get support to people. So I think that's one of the things that we have seen in this pandemic period, where we have had more people move on to universal credit, which is, you know, both an in and out of work benefit. We have seen more people move on to that, but it's continued to deliver, and I think that for me is a very positive thing. But in terms of the interaction between business and job centres, that has been happening for some time.
I'm in danger of being unfair to DWP here, because I'm sure it wasn't the case when Alok was there, but they have we find them a little less than accommodating to the more entrepreneurial approach, and they are much more likely to think in terms of employment and employment routes back into the job market, rather than seeing other routes that could be taken. And I'm sure this is just the nature of the way the organisation was set up in the first place, but I'm sure that everybody's having to adapt to this new reality, this new world that we're living in. And Teresa Kofi's got the opportunity and is certainly taking it with Kickstart, that maybe we'll see new innovations coming by where they will be much more prepared to back somebody wanting to start their own businesses or become self-employed.
Cool. And I'm just trying to get through some of the questions on Q&A. So for many SMEs with tight margins, loans are not a way forward. Will the government consider additional grants for those who earn on commission, for example, travel agents? And Alok, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, so having said earlier that we've done some element of sector support, but obviously for sectors at one point we required to be closed. I think what we've tried to do is to have a all economy approach to this. Obviously, everything is kept under review, but I think it's also important that what we're doing now in this next stage, you've seen the job support scheme that the Chancellor announced in terms of supporting employers getting people back into work. And in fact, in the furlough scheme in its last few months, of course, also allowed for much more flexible working. But I think the next stage of this is how we can support people to get back into work, but then also creating these new jobs. And I talked about, one of those elements was supporting people in the construction sector, in the installation sector, in terms of the green jobs that are being supported through the Green Homes grant. So look, everything is of course kept under review, but you've seen the different phases of the support that the Chancellor has announced, and I think the focus now is of course in supporting jobs that we have now, but then also looking to see how we can create further and new jobs. And Martin's referred a couple of times to the Kickstart scheme. I mean, that's £2 billion going in to support young people. I'm someone who's got a daughter who in the next end of this academic year will be entering the workplace, and young people have had a pretty tough time. I mean, lots of people have had a tough time, but actually young people have had a tough time of it, and we need to make sure that we are there particularly to support them as well.
Martin?
Yeah, I think there are sectors. I mean, I think, did I hear it right? It was travel agent. I mean, there are some sectors that it's almost impossible for them to trade under the current climate, and I think loading them up with more debt is really counterproductive. So I think that there will have to be a way where we decide we either want to try and sustain those businesses, in which case some form of grant support will be the only way, or we're prepared to let them die. And hopefully we're not going to take the latter route.
Okay, and we've got a question from Jonathan Garson. He says, as a small business owner, the £1,000 bonus to keep on employees will help. Could another incentive be made available for employees earning less than 1,560? I guess one question is when we've gone past this 1,000 bonus, what will happen then to these employees?
Sorry, Charlotte, I didn't catch that. After
so
we've gone,
once the employees have received their bonus, what happens next? Will they keep retaining the staff? Will it make that much difference to the redundancies?
Well, so I think you have to look at this in a combination of the job support scheme, but then also the retention bonus. So you're able to get access to both. I mean, the reality is that what we are doing through these measures is to support businesses who, at the end of the day, they want, if they possibly can, to continue trading, to ride out the issues that we have right now. And we will emerge from this, the other side, either through vaccines or testing regimes. I mean, we will emerge from this the other side. But I think what the policies that have been put in place are there to support employers who want to bring their employees back for a part of the time. They certainly do want to shut down their businesses. What they need is help to keep going. And Martin talked about the issue of, and a number of the questions have been around debt. Well, actually, what we're doing here is offering cash support so that people are able to bring employees back, even if it's for part of the time, as they build up the business over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I think the problem here is the relationship between the job support scheme and the bonus. I think many small businesses are struggling to figure out how the two interface. And I know that if they make somebody redundant in the final month in January of the job retention or the job retention bonus, they will lose that bonus. So there's a lot of confusion about whether they have to, at what point would they be expected to sustain that job, and therefore to make that decision they would have to be very clear about what the financial implications are for their business. And I think a lot of small businesses are not clear about the exact rules and how they would apply in particular circumstances. So it is tricky. And of course that's counterproductive, because then faced with complication, they'll choose to make people redundant rather than take the risk.
So you finding a lot of people quite confused about some of the schemes from your
Confused about the relationship between the bonus and the job support scheme, yeah. We've had lots of questions about that. And they could be, I can understand the confusion because it's not crystal clear. And therefore, I think maybe an extra effort needs to be made to make sure that people do understand them, how those two schemes will work together, so that they make rational decisions and don't get rid of people that perhaps they shouldn't get rid of.
And on that note about getting rid of people, Mark Weston, he says, why is there such focus on Kickstarter schemes when it's impossible to keep existing jobs alive? Do they, by which I think he means the government, want us to fire existing staff and replace with youth? Do you think, Alok, that's fair, that's a message that's come across from these schemes about, the apprenticeship schemes and other such?
Well, no, I mean, I that certainly isn't the intention. I think, as I said, there's a range of measures we're putting in to support everyone. I think the Kickstart scheme is particularly aimed at young people, because we know if you are looking to get into the workplace, it is more challenging, especially if you haven't got work experience previously. So that's why that particular piece of support has been provided. But all the other measures apply to the whole workforce. And since you raised the issue of apprenticeships, yes, we provided more funding to encourage employers to take on apprentices who are below 25, but there's also an incentive, financial incentive, that is available to employers to take on apprentices who are over 25 as well. So I think there's a whole range of policies that are put in place, but the Kickstart scheme, yes, absolutely, it is aimed at young people, because I think for many of them starting out on the jobs ladder for the first time, that in many ways is the most critical point in your career.
And Martin, what do you think? Do you think that there's been an underlying message that the government really is focusing all its energy on young people, and it needs to be more widespread?
No, I think it is recognising that if you look at the industries or sectors rather that are hardest hit by this, retail, hospitality, and leisure, they are largely young employees, and And then you've got a lot of new graduates coming onto the market from university who haven't got roles to go to. And if you've got a viable business and you really think that with a bit of help, you could take on somebody who's got new ideas, fresh thoughts, who could maybe help you reinvigorate your business by, taking it in a different direction, looking at a different product, looking at tech support, then I think that's what Kickstart's aimed at. It's aimed at getting real talent into a business that needs to develop and change, which I think is a good thing.
Okay, and now we've got another tax question, Alok. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but it's from Robert J. Park. Are you going to tax business more or consumers to pay for the lockdown policies of the pandemic?
Yes, well, I mean, Charlotte,
you to the question I gave earlier.
It's exactly that. I mean, you'll forgive me. Look, I know this is a very serious question, so I don't want to in any way denigrate the question or downplay it. I mean, it's a very important point. But as I've said, I mean, I think future tax policy, how we deal with the debt that we've taken on. I mean, those are matters that will be set out in the proper way. Lots of discussions that obviously take place in government on this, but ultimately the Treasury lead off on this, and I really don't think it would be appropriate for me to start second guessing the tax policy of this government. But I mean, how can I put it like this? I note the point that's been made.
And Martin, do you want to add anything?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is I hope not. I hope not. I've made the case why I think that would be a bad idea. And if you're going to make changes to the tax regime, then there's reforms to the structure of the tax regime, not just piling on the same old taxes in a sort of tired way of raising additional funds.
Okay, well, as we're coming, sadly, we're coming a bit to the end of the session. I thought we'd end on a note about your general thoughts about how the UK economy is going to change in the long term, post-COVID, and what's your message each to small business owners about the future? So, Alok, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, how the economy will evolve. What I would like is for us to get back to the growth levels that we had previously. But of course, what we've seen over the last few months has been somewhat of a recovery in GDP, but we're still well below where we were in March. I think there's been some recovery in terms of consumer spending as well, and we want that to continue. But I think if we look at what does the future economy look like, and we're talking some years into the future, this is about how is it that you create these high value added jobs which are leading to higher productivity as well, but in growth sectors where we're also creating these green jobs, and we're having an impact in terms of our net zero targets for the future. So if you look around the UK, we have clusters of excellence. You've got offshore wind in the northeast. I think it's been a big success in terms of growth in that particular area. We're now the largest offshore wind producer in the world. If you look at life sciences, Scotland, other parts of the UK, big clusters of excellence when it comes to life sciences. You've got artificial intelligence, for instance, in Northern Ireland, or you've got the automotive sector when it, overall automotive, but then also looking at electric vehicles in the Midlands. So there are lots of areas around the country where there are clusters of excellence. And I think what we want to do overall is obviously support the jobs that we have now, but then as we transition as an economy as well, we want to support those jobs of the future. And my message to business is twofold. First, to say that my ministerial team and I are champions for business at the heart of government, and everything that we sort of hear and see, we listen to, and we present the case for business. And it's been great actually working with Martin and the FSB. We've had a really great collaborative approach, and that ability to trust one another, to have those discussions in confidence as well. And that's something that I've really appreciated. And I think the second thing to say is that look, it is challenging and it is tough, but the Conservative Party has always been the party of business, and we will continue to do everything we can to support you in the business world.
Brilliant. And Martin?
Well, the reality is, if you ask any small businessman like me about the future, we have an optimism bias. So we tend to see things through rose-tinted glasses, and I honestly am very optimistic about us coming through this crisis and people adapting to the new world, because I think small businesses, that's their strength. They are flexible and adaptable and innovative. So, I do have a lot of confidence in the future and that we can come through this. And the message really is that, we're on your side. So if let's hope between myself and Alok, we can navigate these choppy waters.
Well, thank you. So we're coming to the end of what's been an extremely interesting conversation. I'd like to thank Alok and Martin for their expertise and time today. I've learned a lot from it, and I hope everyone that's watching has as well. I'd also like to thank FSB for making this event possible, and I'd like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in and your insightful questions. If you'd like to watch this event again or share it with friends, it'll be on Conservative Home's YouTube channel. Otherwise, that's it from us today. On day 3 of the conference, our final event will be broadcast tomorrow night at 7 p.m. That's the Mobcast Live. So don't forget to register for what will be a very special episode of our popular podcast. In the meantime, have a fantastic evening, everyone. Goodbye.
Okay.